Kai Rhodes stood before the Intergalactic Culinary Academy's board of directors, his presentation hovering in holographic brilliance behind him. The data was irrefutable. Across 2,347 inhabited worlds, 89% of their primary protein sources were described as tasting like Earth chicken. This can't be a coincidence, Kai declared, running a hand through his dark curls. The board members, a diverse collection of species from across the galaxy, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Arcturian chairperson's crystalline structure flickered with skepticism. Among the audience, a tall, silver-skinned figure leaned forward, her iridescent eyes fixed on Kai's data. Vena Tsar, the leading xenogastronomist from the Centauri system, found herself intrigued not just by the findings, but by the passion in the human's voice. Mr. Rhodes, the Arcturian chairperson's translating crystal chimed, "While your research is thorough, what exactly are you proposing?" "I'm proposing that we're missing something fundamental about galactic cuisine," Kai replied, advancing to his next slide. "How is it possible that species who had never encountered Earth, never tasted chicken, somehow developed foods that mirror its flavor profile exactly?" A murmur rippled through the chamber. Vena stood, her silvery robes catching the light. "I believe Mr. Rhodes is onto something significant. The Centauri archive has similar records dating back millennia, long before Earth joined the Galactic Commonwealth." The board chamber erupted in overlapping conversations. Kai's eyes met Vena's across the room, a silent understanding passing between them. This wasn't just about food anymore, it was about uncovering a mystery that spanned the galaxy's history. After the presentation, Vena found Kai in the Academy's sprawling rooftop garden, where exotic plants from hundreds of worlds grew in carefully maintained environments. He was studying a Jovian pepper plant, its luminescent fruits pulsing softly in the artificial twilight. "Your research aligns with patterns I've been tracking," Vena said, approaching him. Up close, her silver skin had subtle patterns that shifted like moonlight on water. "But you've taken it further than anyone else dared." Kai turned, appreciating how the garden's bioluminescent plants created an ethereal aura around her. "Dr. Tsar, I've read all your papers on cross-species taste perception. Your work laid the foundation for my research." "Vena, please," she corrected with a smile that reminded Kai of starlight. "I have a proposition for you. The Centauri Science Council has a research vessel, the Epicurean. We've been mapping culinary patterns across the galaxy, but we've never had a human perspective on board." A group of students passed by, their excited chatter about the day's presentation carrying across the garden. Kai watched them go, then looked back at Vena. "You think there's more to this than just similar taste profiles, don't you?" "Much more," Vena confirmed, her eyes shimmering with excitement. "Think about it, across vastly different biochemistries and evolutionary paths, we've all developed this one common taste. It's as if something guided our culinary evolution," Kai finished her thought. The implications were staggering. "Exactly," Vena's voice dropped to a near whisper. "And there's something else. Have you heard of the Tastemasters Guild?" Kai shook his head, intrigued by the conspiratorial tone in her voice. "They're a secretive organization of chefs and food scholars. Some say they possess recipes that predate recorded history. They've been watching your research, Kai. And they're worried." The garden's ambient lighting began to shift, simulating sunset. The Jovian pepper plants' glow intensified in response, casting blue shadows across their faces. "Why would they be worried about taste patterns?" Kai asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer was bigger than he'd imagined. Vena glanced around before continuing. "Because if you're right, if this universal taste isn't a coincidence, it means everything we know about our species' independent evolution might be wrong. The Guild guards ancient knowledge, Kai. Knowledge that might explain why the galaxy's foods share this common thread." Kai looked out over the garden, at the countless alien plants that somehow all found their way into the grand tapestry of galactic cuisine. "When does the Epicurean leave?" 2 days, Vena replied, her expression brightening. Does that mean you'll join us? A chance to solve the biggest mystery in culinary history? Try and stop me, Kai grinned. Though I should probably pack some actual chicken, for comparison purposes. Venna laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. I think this is the beginning of a fascinating partnership, Kai Rhodes. Neither of them could have known then just how right she was, or how their investigation into a simple matter of taste would unravel secrets that had been simmering in the galaxy's pot for millions of years. The Epicurean drifted through the shimmering waves of hyperspace, its research laboratories humming with activity. Kai stood in the ship's main testing chamber, surrounded by floating holograms of molecular structures. His sample of Earth chicken sat in the analysis chamber, its genetic code being mapped in exquisite detail. Our seventh stop, and every planet's protein structure shows the same anomaly, Venna announced, her silver fingers dancing through the holographic data. She'd taken to wearing her hair in an intricate braid that caught the light of the lab's instruments, something Kai found increasingly distracting. It's not just similar, Kai mused, enlarging a particular sequence. These base proteins are identical at a fundamental level, despite evolving on completely different worlds. He gestured at the surrounding samples they'd collected from various planets. It's as if something template was spread across the galaxy. The ship's artificial gravity shifted slightly as they dropped out of hyperspace. Through the lab's viewport, the spice lanes, ancient trade routes that connected the galaxy's oldest civilizations, stretched out before them in a glittering network of navigation beacons. Captain Roth is hailing us, the ship's AI announced. A moment later, the gruff voice of their Andromedian captain filled the lab. Dr. Tsar, Mr. Rhodes, you'll want to see this. Bridge, immediately. They found Captain Roth's massive form hunched over the navigation console, his crystalline exoskeleton reflecting the bridge's emergency lights. We've detected an anomaly in the spice lane's subspace signature. Something's been interfering with the trade routes. The main screen showed a complex web of energy patterns. To Kai's surprise, they looked remarkably similar to the protein structures they'd been studying. Venna noticed it too, her eyes widening. Captain, she said, can you overlay our protein analysis with these energy patterns? When the images merged, the bridge crew fell silent. The match was undeniable. Well, Kai breathed, I think we just found out how that template was spread. The spice lanes aren't just trade routes, they're delivery systems. But who built them? Roth demanded. The lanes predate all known civilizations. Before anyone could respond, the ship's sensors blared a warning. A massive vessel had dropped out of hyperspace directly ahead of them. Its design was unlike anything in known space, organic curves blended with crystalline structures in impossible ways. We're being hailed, the communications officer reported, her tentacles writhing nervously. The screen flickered to life, revealing a hooded figure. When it spoke, its voice seemed to resonate from multiple sources at once. Epicurean, you are investigating matters beyond your understanding. The Tastemasters Guild cannot allow this to continue. Venna stepped forward. The Guild? Why are you interfering with official research? Dr. Tsar, the figure's tone carried a note of amusement, surely you've realized by now that your official research threatens to expose secrets kept for millions of years. The unity of taste is not a coincidence, it is a legacy, and one we are sworn to protect. Kai moved closer to Venna, noticing how the silver patterns in her skin had begun to pulse with anxiety. A legacy from whom? The first chefs, the figure replied. The beings who seeded the galaxy with life itself. They left us their recipes, written in the very fabric of space-time, encoded in the spice lanes themselves. Captain Roth's crystalline form shimmered with skepticism. If what you're saying is true, why hide it? Because, Captain, some recipes are too dangerous to share. The protein patterns you've discovered are merely the surface. The true purpose of the universal taste goes far deeper. The figure leaned forward, its features still hidden in shadow. We have watched humanity since they first reached the stars, waiting to see if they would discover the truth. And now, thanks to Mr. Rhodes here, they have. The massive ship's engines began to power up. You have a choice. Leave now, forget what you found, or come with us and learn the full recipe, with all its devastating implications. Kai felt Vena's hand slip into his, her touch cool and electric. They shared a look, years of scientific curiosity and growing trust conveyed in a single glance. We're scientists, Vena declared. We came this far for the truth. And if this truth is really as important as you say, Kai added, squeezing her hand, maybe it's time it was shared with everyone. The hooded figure remained silent for a long moment. Finally, it nodded. Very well. Prepare for docking. Welcome to the kitchen, young ones. I hope you're ready to learn what's really been cooking in the galaxy's pot. As the massive ship extended its docking corridor, Kai and Vena stood at the viewport, watching the structure shimmer like heat waves over a grill. Whatever they were about to discover, they would face it together. Kai, Vena whispered, her iridescent eyes reflecting the strange ship's lights, I have a feeling we're about to learn why chicken isn't just a taste, it's a key to something much bigger. Well, he replied with a slight smile, at least we brought samples. The kitchen was unlike anything Kai had ever seen. Massive chambers stretched in impossible directions, filled with cultivation tanks where proteins and compounds from across the galaxy swirled in precisely maintained environments. The air itself seemed alive with spices and aromas that defied description. Their guide, who had introduced herself as Grand Chef Naira, led them through corridors that seemed to shift and change behind them. Her hood was now pulled back, revealing a face that somehow incorporated features from dozens of species, as if she were a living fusion of galactic diversity. The first chefs, she explained, her multiple voices creating harmonious echoes, weren't just master cooks. They were architects of life itself. They seeded the galaxy with compatible biological building blocks, ensuring that when species eventually evolved and met, they could share meals together. A galaxy-wide genetic restaurant, Kai mused, watching as a group of guild members in shimmering robes tended to what looked like a garden of crystalline plants. But why? Vena, who had been unusually quiet since they boarded, suddenly spoke up. Because food brings people together. It's the foundation of diplomacy, of understanding. Her hand brushed against Kai's as they walked. The first chefs weren't just creating cuisine, they were creating community. Naira's expression shifted into something like approval. Precisely, Dr. Tsar. But that's only part of the equation. Follow me. They descended into deeper levels of the kitchen, where the walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that matched the protein structures they'd been studying. In a vast circular chamber, dozens of guild members worked at stations that seemed to blend ancient cooking techniques with advanced quantum technology. The universal taste pattern isn't just about flavor, Naira continued, gesturing to a central hologram that showed the galaxy's spiral arms. It's a communication system. The first chefs encoded information into these basic protein structures, information that could be accessed only when species learned to truly understand each other's cuisine. That's why the pattern shows up in the spice lanes, Kai realized, the pieces finally clicking together. They're not just trade routes, they're the galaxy's dinner table, bringing everyone together. But there's more, Vena interjected, her scientific mind racing ahead. The identical protein structures, the quantum resonance in the lanes, it's all connected to something bigger, isn't it? Naira led them to a sealed chamber, its doors marked with symbols that seemed to writhe and change as they watched. The first chefs left us a recipe. Not just for food, but for ascension. They believed that when species learned to truly share meals together, to understand each other's tastes and traditions, they would be ready for the next step in evolution. The chamber doors opened, revealing a sight that made both Kai and Vena gasp. Inside was what appeared to be a kitchen, but one that operated on principles that defied physics. Ingredients merged and separated in impossible ways, creating dishes that existed in multiple states simultaneously. This is why we've kept the secret, Naira said softly. Humanity's discovery of the chicken taste pattern wasn't a coincidence. Your species has an unprecedented ability to adapt and share your cuisine, to make it accessible to others. You've done in centuries what most species take millennia to achieve. And now humanity's spreading across the galaxy, sharing their food everywhere they go, Venna added, her eyes wide with understanding. We're accelerating the process. Kai watched as a guild member created a dish that seemed to contain the essence of starlight itself. But why try to stop our research? If this is all leading to something positive. Because not everyone wants evolution, came a new voice. They turned to see Captain Roth entering the chamber, but his crystalline form had changed, becoming more complex, more refined. Some believe we're not ready for what the first chefs planned. The crystalline consortium, Naira explained, has been trying to suppress this knowledge for eons. They believe rapid cultural exchange will lead to chaos. She fixed Roth with a penetrating stare. How long have you been their agent, Captain? Long enough to know that humans will destroy everything with their reckless sharing of cuisine. Roth's voice had taken on a sharp, dangerous edge. The pattern must remain dormant until we are ready. The chamber's energy fields began to fluctuate as Roth's crystalline form expanded, sending sharp shards flying in all directions. Guild members scattered, their robes swirling as they activated ancient defense systems. Kai pulled Venna behind a quantum cooking station as crystalline spikes embedded themselves in the wall behind them. I don't suppose the first chefs left any recipes for dealing with rogue crystalline beings. Venna's eyes lit up. Actually. She reached for the station's controls, her fingers dancing across the quantum interface. If the protein patterns are really a communication system, maybe we can use them to communicate with his crystalline structure. As Roth advanced, his form growing more monstrous by the second, Naira began chanting in an ancient language that made the very air vibrate. The kitchen systems responded, channeling energy through the Spice Lane's quantum network. Kai, Venna called out, never taking her eyes off the controls, I need that chicken sample. The baseline protein structure, it might be the key. He pulled the sample from his pocket, somehow still intact after everything they'd been through. As he handed it to Venna, their fingers touched, and in that moment, both felt the weight of what they'd discovered, not just about the galaxy's cuisine, but about each other. The future of galactic evolution hung in the balance, and it all came down to a simple piece of chicken. Time seemed to slow in the quantum kitchen as Venna's fingers flew across the control panel, the chicken sample's proteins being broken down and analyzed in real time. Roth's crystalline form had grown to touch the chamber's ceiling, his structure incorporating pieces of ancient cooking equipment as he advanced. The protein sequence is accepting the quantum resonance, Venna called out, her silver skin glowing with reflected energy. But we need more power to broadcast it through his crystalline matrix. Naira pressed her hands against the chamber's walls, and suddenly the entire kitchen hummed with power. The spice lanes, she commanded, her multiple voices creating a chorus that seemed to vibrate through reality itself. Connect them. All of them. Kai watched in amazement as holographic displays showed thousands of trade routes lighting up across the galaxy, their energy flowing into the kitchen. The air filled with the sense of a million worlds' cuisines, and for a moment, he understood what the first chefs had envisioned, a galaxy united through the simple act of sharing food. You cannot stop evolution, Roth's voice boomed, his crystalline body now a twisted cathedral of sharp edges and impossible angles. Humanity's chaos must be contained. You're wrong, Kai shouted back, moving to Venna's side at the control panel. Chaos isn't our weakness, it's our strength. We take foods from everywhere we go, adapt them, share them back. We don't destroy cultures, we help them grow. Venna's eyes widened as new data flowed across her screen. Kai, look at this. The protein pattern, it's not just about taste. It's a key to understanding each other at the molecular level. The first chefs didn't want us to all be the same, they wanted us to be able to share our differences. As if in response to her discovery, the chicken's sample began to glow with an inner light that pulsed in sync with the spice lane's energy. Naira's chanting reached a crescendo, and the quantum kitchen's reality began to shift around them. Now, Vena. Naira commanded. Broadcast the pattern. Vena slammed her hand down on the control panel, and a wave of energy erupted from their station. The protein pattern, amplified by the power of the entire galactic trade network, washed over Roth's crystalline form. Where it touched, his sharp edges began to soften, his structure beginning to resonate with the fundamental frequency of shared sustenance. No, Roth's voice wavered as his form began to change. The pattern. I can feel it. The crystalline monster that had been their captain began to shrink, his structure realigning itself with the quantum harmonies of the first chef's design. The process released waves of energy that rippled through the kitchen, activating ancient systems that had laid dormant for millions of years. Kai grabbed Vena's hand as reality fluctuated around them. Whatever happens, he said, looking into her iridescent eyes, I'm glad I got to solve this mystery with you. She squeezed his hand back, her silver skin glowing brighter than ever. The mystery's not over yet, Kai. Look. The quantum kitchen had transformed. Where Roth had stood was now a perfectly formed crystalline sphere, hovering in midair. Within it, images began to form, star maps, recipes, and messages left by the first chefs themselves. The crystalline consortium was right to be afraid, Naira said softly, approaching the sphere. But not because humanity would destroy their culture. Because humanity would help all cultures grow beyond their limitations. The sphere projected a massive hologram of the galaxy, showing how the protein patterns had spread through the spice lanes over millions of years. But now, with the pattern fully activated, new connections were forming. The trade routes were becoming something more, a neural network of shared experiences and understanding. The first chef's final recipe, Vena breathed, watching the display with wonder. It's not about making everything taste the same. It's about helping us understand how we can be different and still share a meal together. Roth's crystalline form had stabilized into a smaller, humanoid shape. He looked at his hands in amazement. I understand now. The pattern doesn't erase who we are. It helps us become more than we were. The kitchen hummed with new energy as ancient systems fully awakened, responding to the completed protein pattern. Displays showed similar activations occurring in Tastemaster facilities across the galaxy. The change they had triggered would not be stopped. So, Kai said, still holding Vena's hand, what do we do now? Naira smiled, her multiple faces showing various aspects of joy. Now, we share the greatest meal ever prepared, the one that brings the galaxy together. The quantum kitchen began to reconfigure itself, preparing for a feast that would mark the beginning of a new era in galactic civilization. As guild members returned to their stations, now working with newly awakened technologies, Kai and Vena stood at the heart of it all, witnesses to the fulfillment of the first chef's grand design. You know, Vena said with a slight smile, I still haven't actually tried real Earth chicken. Kai laughed, pulling her closer. Well, I guess we'll have to fix that. Though after all this, it might seem a bit ordinary. Something tells me, she replied, watching as the galaxy's greatest chefs began to prepare a celebration unlike any before, that nothing will ever be ordinary again. 6 months after the activation of the first chef's pattern, the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The Intergalactic Culinary Academy's Grand Hall was packed with representatives from thousands of worlds, gathered for what had become known as the Convergence Feast. Kai adjusted his formal chef's attire, now adorned with both Earth emblems and the ancient symbols of the Tastemasters Guild. From his position on the presentation platform, he could see Vena directing the final preparations, her silver skin complemented by robes that shifted colors with her movements. The months of working together to implement the first chef's vision had only strengthened their connection. The Crystalline Consortium's delegation has arrived, Naira announced, appearing beside him in a shimmer of quantum energy. She had become their mentor in understanding the deeper implications of the protein pattern's activation. And they've brought their new molecular gastronomy dishes. Indeed, Kai could see Roth among them, his crystalline form now a harmonious blend of sharp edges and flowing curves. The former captain had become one of their strongest allies in spreading the first chef's message of unity through diversity. Distinguished guests, Vena's voice carried across the hall as she took the central platform. Today marks half a year since the great awakening of our shared culinary heritage. But more importantly, it marks the beginning of something the first chefs could only dream of. The hall's holographic systems activated, showing the transformation that had swept across the galaxy. Trade routes that once carried only goods now pulsed with shared knowledge and cultural exchange. The protein pattern had become a foundation for understanding, allowing species to literally taste each other's experiences. Humanity's gift wasn't just discovering the pattern, she continued, her eyes meeting Kai's across the room. It was showing us how to celebrate our differences rather than fear them. Every Earth restaurant that adapted alien cuisines, every human chef who learned to cook for different species, they were preparing us for this moment. Kai made his way to join her on the platform, passing tables where humans sat next to beings of energy, crystalline entities shared meals with gaseous life forms, and ancient rivals broke bread together using the first chef's quantum gastronomy. The protein pattern wasn't a template to make everything the same, Kai added, standing beside Vena. It was a language, teaching us how to share our unique flavors with each other. And now, we're writing new recipes together. The hall's central table transformed, quantum technology materializing dishes from across the galaxy. But these weren't traditional recipes, they were new creations, born from the combination of countless culinary traditions. Today's feast features dishes that would have been impossible 6 months ago, Vena announced. Not just because we lacked the technology, but because we lacked the understanding. Each dish is a collaboration between different species, different cultures, different ways of experiencing taste itself. Naira stepped forward, her multiple voices harmonizing. The first chefs seeded the galaxy with compatible life because they knew that true advancement could only come when all beings could share in the most fundamental of pleasures, a good meal with good company. The feast began, and the hall filled with a symphony of reactions as beings experienced flavors that transcended their traditional biological limitations. The quantum gastronomy allowed each dish to adapt to its consumer while maintaining its essential character, unity through diversity made manifest. Later, as the celebration was in full swing, Kai and Vena found a quiet moment in the Academy's rooftop garden where their journey had begun. The garden had evolved too, now featuring quantum-enhanced plants that could be appreciated by any species. Remember when we thought this was just about chicken? Kai laughed, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that seemed more vibrant since the pattern's activation. Vena's hand found his, her touch sending pleasant quantum resonances through their connection. We've come so far, but I feel like we're still just beginning. The first chefs left us a foundation, but what we build on it, that's up to us. Speaking of building, Kai turned to face her, pulling out a small quantum crystal. The Guild has approved our proposal for a new research station. A place where we can explore not just new foods, but new ways of bringing people together. Vena's iridescent eyes sparkled as she took the crystal, watching the plans shimmer within it. The Epicurean Institute for Quantum Gastronomy, she read. And they want us to run it together. Well, Kai smiled, his heart racing, I can't think of anyone I'd rather explore the galaxy's kitchen with. Above them, the spice lanes glittered with new energy, carrying not just trade goods but the shared experiences of countless beings. The first chef's legacy had evolved beyond anything they could have imagined, transformed by humanity's chaotic creativity and determination to connect with others. You know, Vena said, leaning closer to Kai, we still haven't solved the original mystery. Why does everything taste like chicken? Kai laughed, pulling her into an embrace. Maybe that's the next adventure. After all, we've got a whole galaxy of recipes to explore." Together, she agreed, and as they kissed, the quantum resonance of their connection sent ripples through the garden's plants, creating a display of light and color that celebrated the beauty of two different beings finding harmony. In the hall below, the convergence feast continued, a testament to how far they'd come and a promise of what was yet to be. The galaxy had learned that the best meals weren't about making everything taste the same, they were about bringing different tastes together and creating something new, something wonderful, something that could only exist through the courage to share and the wisdom to celebrate what makes each of us unique. And somewhere, the first chef's pattern pulsed through the quantum fabric of space-time, not as a rigid template, but as an endless possibility, a recipe for a future where every new combination added flavor to the grand feast of existence.